All right, so you're ready to dive into data analysis. Awesome. We're going on a deep dive into the book, Big Data Analytics Made Easy, to help you get started. It might seem daunting, but trust us, we're going to extract the juiciest, most useful bits from this book and present them to you in a way that won't make your head spin.
Exactly. We'll guide you through the essential first steps, highlight some common pitfalls, and offer insights that will help you approach your data analysis journey with confidence.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The book starts by talking about the analytics lifecycle, a fancy way of saying, here's how to tackle an analytics project.
And the very first stage, even before you start crunching numbers,
Yep.
is problem identification. The book emphasizes that this is more than just knowing what the client says they want. It's about understanding the real issue.
They give this awesome example about a credit card company. The company says they only want applications from good customers. Sounds simple, right? But as the book points out, what's a good customer? Someone who pays on time or someone who racks up interest charges?
That's the point. It depends entirely on the company's goals. Are they trying to minimize risk or maximize revenue? Understanding the context is crucial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, once you've nailed down the problem, you move on to data. But data comes in all shapes and sizes, and it's rarely ready to be analyzed straight away.
Which brings us to data preparation. This is where you clean the data, transform it, and get it into a format that makes analysis possible. The book highlights that this stage can take up a huge chunk of your project time, often more than 50%.
So true. And it's not just about technical skills. It's about being critical of your data. Are there any biases? Is the data granular enough? Are the scales consistent? All these things can impact your results.
Right, and that can really trip you up later on if you don't take care of those things right at the start.
Totally. It's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah.
You're just asking for trouble down the line.
Exactly. So spending time on data prep might seem tedious, but trust me, it's worth it in the long run.
I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground already, just in these initial stages of the analytics lifecycle.
Yeah, we have. But these really are the crucial steps that set the stage for everything that comes next.
Absolutely. So if you're just starting out with data analysis, take these lessons to heart. Make sure you understand the problem inside and out, and don't skimp on data preparation.
It'll save you so much headache later on.
Totally agree. And for those of you who are already seasoned data analysts, it's always good to revisit the basics. Make sure you're not cutting corners.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, we'll be back in a bit with more from Big Data Analytics Made Easy. Stay tuned.
See you then. So we've laid the groundwork. Problem identification. Data prep. Now we can finally talk about the fun part.
Yeah.
Making sense of the data.
Right, absolutely. I'm itching to dive into the model planning building stage the book talks about. This is where we get to use those statistical methods and algorithms everyone's always buzzing about.
Hold on there, eager beaver. Before we go full-on mad scientists, the book makes a point about statistical thinking. It's not just about blindly applying tools. It's about using them thoughtfully.
So, understanding the why behind the what.
Exactly. This book really hammers home the importance of things like probability, different types of distributions, hypothesis testing, all the stuff that helps you draw valid conclusions from your data.
Honestly, that's always been the part that trips me up. It feels so theoretical, you know. Can you give me an example of how this statistical thinking actually plays out in a real project?
Sure. Imagine you're analyzing sales data for an online store. Let's say you notice a spike in sales for a particular product. Now, you could just get excited and assume it's because of your brilliant marketing campaign, but a statistical thinker would pause and ask, is this spike statistically significant, or could it be due to random chance?
So you're saying don't jump to conclusions before testing your assumptions.
Right. Maybe that spike coincides with a holiday or some external event you didn't account for. Hypothesis testing helps you determine whether that jump in sales is truly meaningful or just a fluke.
That makes a lot more sense now. So
Yeah.
you're not just looking at the numbers, you're thinking critically about what they really mean.
Exactly. Now, once you've got that statistical mindset in place, the book dives into some specific techniques. It talks about things like matrices, vectors, data frames, all the building blocks for analyzing data in a tool like R.
I've heard of R, but I'll be honest, those terms sound a little intimidating.
Don't worry, they're not as scary as they sound. Think of them as different ways of organizing your data so you can work with it efficiently. It's like having the right containers to store your ingredients before you start cooking.
Okay, that analogy helps.
Yeah.
So, once we've got our data organized and our statistical thinking caps on, what kinds of techniques can we actually apply? The book mentions things like dimensionality reduction, which sounds kind of like science fiction.
Well, it's not about shrinking objects in real life, but it is about shrinking your data in a way. Imagine you're trying to analyze customer data with hundreds of different attributes. It's like trying to juggle 100 balls at once, so way too much to handle.
Yeah, I can see how that would get overwhelming fast.
Dimensionality reduction helps you simplify that math by identifying the most important variables and combining similar ones, essentially reducing the number of balls you're juggling.
So it's about focusing on the variables that really matter, the ones that are most likely to give you meaningful insights.
Exactly. Techniques like principal component analysis, or PCA, help you find those key variables that capture the most variation in your data. It's like finding the signals in the noise.
This is starting to make sense, but I'm curious about how we actually use these techniques to extract insights. The book mentions things like kernel density estimation and association rule mining. Can you break those down for me?
Sure. Let's start with kernel density estimation. Imagine you're looking at the distribution of customer ages in your data. A histogram might show you some general trends. But kernel density estimation gives you a smoother, more nuanced picture of how ages are spread out.
So it's like getting a high-resolution image instead of a pixelated one.
Exactly. Now, association rule mining is all about uncovering hidden relationships in your data. Think of it as finding those people who bought this also bought that recommendations you see online.
Ah, so that's how they figure out that people who buy diapers are also likely to buy beer.
Precisely. Association rule mining helps you discover those unexpected connections, which can be incredibly valuable for things like product placement, marketing campaigns, or even understanding customer behavior.
This is fascinating stuff. We've gone from understanding the basics of statistical thinking to exploring some pretty sophisticated techniques. It's like we're building up our data analysis toolkit piece by piece.
You got it. And we've only scratched the surface. The book also covers powerful techniques like regression and classification, which help you predict outcomes and make data-driven decisions. But we'll save those for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. I'm eager to see how these techniques come into play when we're trying to solve real-world problems. All right, so we've explored all these cool techniques for analyzing data: dimensionality reduction, kernel density estimation, association rule mining. It's like we've learned all these secret handshakes to get into the data party.
And now it's time to see who's actually got the moves on the dance floor.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we know if our fancy data analysis footwork is any good? The book talks about something called performance evaluation metrics, which sounds a bit like a report card for our models.
Exactly. You've got to measure how well your models are performing, otherwise you're just guessing. And just like there are different types of exams, multiple choice, essay questions, there are different metrics for different types of data analysis problems.
Okay, so what are some of these metrics? Let's say we're building a model to predict something, like housing prices.
That would be a regression problem. For that, you might look at metrics like R-squared or RMSE. R-squared tells you how much of the variation in housing prices your model actually explains. Think of it as a percentage grade on your model's ability to capture the big picture.
So a higher R-squared means a better model,
Right.
generally.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you also have to be careful not to overfit your model, meaning it does a great job explaining the data you use to train it, but fails miserably when faced with new data. That's where metrics like RMSE come in, which measure how far off your predictions are, on average, from the actual values.
So it's like balancing accuracy with the ability to generalize to new situations.
Exactly. Now, if you're dealing with a classification problem,
Hmm.
where you're trying to categorize things, like whether an email is spam or not, you'd use different metrics. Well, accuracy is a common one. It tells you what percentage of emails your model correctly labeled as spam or not spam. But it's not always the best metric, especially if you have imbalanced data, where one category is way more common than the other.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want a spam filter that just labeled everything as not spam.
Yeah.
Because it would technically be right most of the time.
Exactly. So in those cases, you might look at metrics like precision and recall, which focus on how well your model is identifying the specific category you're most interested in. In this case, spam.
It's like saying, okay, out of all the emails you flagged as spam, how many were actually spam? And out of all the real spam emails, how many did you catch?
You got it. And there are even more sophisticated metrics, like the AUC-ROC curve, which gives you a visual representation of how well your model is distinguishing between the two categories.
So basically, we have a whole toolbox of metrics to help us evaluate our models
Yeah.
and make sure they're actually doing what we want them to do.
Right. And this all ties back to that idea of statistical thinking we talked about earlier. You're not just blindly applying algorithms, you're critically evaluating their performance and understanding the limitations of your data and your models.
It's a reminder that data analysis is a journey, not a destination. You're constantly learning, refining, and improving your approach.
Absolutely. In this book, Big Data Analytics Made Easy is a great starting point for that journey. It gives you the foundational knowledge and the practical tips you need to start making sense of data and extracting valuable insights.
Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've gone from defining the problem to preparing our data,
Yeah.
exploring different statistical techniques, and evaluating the performance of our models. It's been a whirlwind tour of the data analysis landscape.
And hopefully you've picked up some valuable tools and perspectives along the way. Remember, the most important thing is to approach data analysis with curiosity, a critical mind, and a willingness to experiment.
And don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Sometimes the best way to learn is to dive in and start playing with data yourself.
Exactly. So go forth, explore, and discover the power of data analysis. Who knows what amazing insights you might uncover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. And remember, the world of data is waiting to be explored.